Okay, lesson 9, Svadhyaya. Svadhyaya means self-study. Now, if you read the handout, there seems to be the suggestion that self-study means that you have to study the self. The reality is a little bit different, a little bit more nuanced. There is an incredible smart logic in the framework that yoga presents us that many people don't see. Even authorities in yoga don't see. So I was taught also in a compartmentalized way, mostly. And it took many years to start seeing the smart logic behind all of that. The incredible systematic approach in the framework that yoga presents us. And that logic and that order also in which it is built up repeats itself again and again. Svadhyaya, self-study, I probably have mentioned it already because I always bombard you with many insights just as they come up. I never stick to the curriculum. Svadhyaya is something that happens naturally. Every person that starts practicing yoga, if you do it correctly, I have to emphasize again and again, if you practice yoga correctly, it leads to increased consciousness, increased sensitivity, increased curiosity also. Curiosity about life. But every beginning, awakening person starts with curiosity about the self. The first thing you want to investigate when you develop more consciousness, awareness, when you awaken your consciousness, is the self. And that also means that self-study is not something that you can do by saying, every day from 7 to 8, I will do self-study. It doesn't work like that. Practice yoga correctly, and self-study integrates into daily life. 24 hours a day. Every experience that we undergo in our daily life, experiences in our daily life interactions, leads to self-study. Because a new quality is born in us as practitioners of yoga. And that is that we want to relate everything that happens in our lives. We want to evaluate naturally everything that happens in our lives. And we want most of all to understand everything that happens in our lives. We develop an ability that most people are lacking, and that is the ability to connect the dots. An ability to see the law of cause and effect at work in daily life. And you will realize, just like I have realized, that coincidence does not exist. Once you start seeing this, you realize that everything has a reason. Everything that happens has a cause. Not only that, it also has a purpose. And that is what you start seeing. And we apply this especially when we suffer. Because yoga is the science that, for a very important part, is designed to reduce suffering. Suffering that all human beings have to go through out of ignorance, out of lack of consciousness. Every time when struck by suffering, by misery, we try to see the connections, what led to it. And what can I do with it in a positive and a constructive way, other than just being miserable and sad? Now I told you about the framework, the logic, so I have to explain that too. This is the one before the last subject. So yoga is kind of coming to a conclusion, but not the whole science of yoga, but this stage of yoga. But the pattern will repeat itself with every next stage, just every time a little bit higher. What you see here, there is a connection between self-study and everything that came before it. I mentioned that with tapas, and I mentioned that also with Svadhyaya. I mentioned it also with the subjects that we studied, the 5 yamas. And the logic is here. We start with the yamas, which are designed to eliminate disharmony from our life. And we eliminate disharmony from our life by becoming conscious of the causes of disharmony. Violence leads to reciprocity, violence in return, causing upheaval. You become distracted, restless, suffer. And you have those 5 yamas, one after the other, builds on the previous one. So in the end, we ended up with non-desire, and then we moved on to Niyama, purity. All the other that came before it are impossible without the practice of purity. Because many people, me included of course, we have a tendency to find excuses for misbehavior. We have a tendency, subconsciously, to find an excuse for lying, to find an excuse for reacting with aggression to another person's aggression, etc. That is not pure. Purity means that your motive has to be right. No excuses anymore. No more the easy way out. Then we have tapas. Now we have to roll up our sleeves and actually start going to work. Because coming to yoga class is tapas. Doing all these difficult, strenuous poses is tapas. But tapas is not just discomfort, any discomfort. You can apply it to any discomfort, but for the purpose of yoga, to awaken consciousness, tapas has to be done in a very particular way. The yoga way, the measured way, the controlled way. You start by standing still, physically. And when you have a certain control over that, you then extend that to the mind, and you try to make the mind more steady. All of that is not possible without the 5 yamas. Because if you go too far in your tapas, in your asana practice, or you just focus on a pretty picture and perfection, you hurt yourself, you deny the reality, you are stealing from yourself by demanding more than is reasonably possible. And of course, non-desire is being violated. You violate all of the principles there. So tapas is done in a very particular way, leading to the next step, self-study. And you will see with the conclusion in the second session, with the last niyama, that is wrapping everything up in a very logical way. Self-study And considering all the subjects that we have studied so far, discussed so far, find a very particular obstacle on their way. That obstacle is mentioned in the handout, and it is called ego. What is ego? We live in a society where the word ego is used a lot, but not many people actually understand what it really means. Ego is not necessarily bad. Just like wine is not necessarily bad. A glass of red wine actually is beneficial for health. Problem starts if you drink the whole bottle. Ego, first of all, in yoga there is no good and bad. But things can result in different outcomes. Ego can manifest in different ways, which we can label good or bad. When ego manifests in a negative way, it is when we're selfish, when we are not considering other people's interest, when we are not considering the interest of the world, environment, the animals, the plants, neighbors, etc. When we pursue our goals and stand on many toes, hurt many people in the process, which is the usual way of doing business. Business people are proud of their harsh way of doing business. They think it translates into success, which in the short term it does. In the long term it doesn't. You build a lot of negative karma when you operate in such a way. But long-term perspective is something that most people do not see. But as a yogi, you will become more and more aware of long-term perspective. Naturally. And it will prevail also in the way that you act and react more and more. When ego manifests in a positive way, it's based on unconditional love. It's based on compassion, empathy. So let me grab back to politics, because it's out there, very obvious for you to compare, to see the difference between ego manifesting in destructive ways and ego manifesting in constructive and healing ways. All you have to do is look at American politics. The last president first of all, people who reach high places in politics, but also in business, captains of industry, presidents of companies, they naturally possess a big ego. There are people with big ego, there are people with small ego. That is a reality. That's a given. People with big ego throughout life eventually find their way to a higher position. That's how the previous president ended up there. He has a huge ego. But it manifests in very destructive ways. He violates all the yamas as we know them. There's no purity. And so, it causes a lot of mayhem. In yoga terms, it causes a lot of disharmony. The president before him, who fortunately had 8 years to do his thing, he was always considerate about the larger picture. He was always the super diplomat, always trying to unite through harmony, through trying to avoid conflict wherever that is possible. Of course, nothing is perfect, nobody is perfect. So there are people who didn't like him, and they can mention some things that he didn't do well. Nobody is perfect, especially not in such a hugely important role. In more recent memory, you can just see the switch that took place when the previous president was voted out and the new president came in. Just totally different. You hardly ever hear the new president saying, I did this and I did that and I am so great and I'm so fantastic. He hardly ever speaks about, he never uses the word I. It always it is about what he thinks he can do to make the world a better place. Not only for America, but for the rest as well. So again, nobody's perfect. You can complain about certain things, but that is not the point. The point is about the essence. And there is a day and night difference between those two big egos. Why is this important? Because many yoga books and yoga teachers claim that your ego must die. So, as an unexperienced yoga student, you scratch your head and you ask yourself, how can my ego die? Is that possible? No, it's impossible. Ego is an indivisible part of every human being. It is who you are. What matters to us is how it manifests. And when we feel it becomes an obstacle, we have to try to deal with it. Ego dies in a what is the opposite of literal? Yeah, thank you. I'm not a native speaker, so sometimes I'm struggling. I'm caught in between three languages, so I'm not perfect at any of them anymore, even my own language. In a figurative way, ego dies when you suffer a lot and come to the conclusion that it was your stupid ego that caused whatever it is that you are dealing with, that causes all the suffering. When you realize that, when you don't realize it, it will happen again and again. You will continue to suffer. But when you realize it, it leads you to develop a certain humility. And humility is the medicine that we use, that we need to deal with ego. And often we develop humility through pain. So that is a figurative way in which the ego dies, but the ego never dies. It cannot die. You are born with a certain amount of ego, and some people have small amounts of ego, other people have very big ego, and it will, in the long term, determine where you will end up in life. If my ego had been bigger, I would have developed a yoga organization. I have the position to do that. But I'm totally not interested in it. Sometimes I've dreamt about it, but it's a distraction from what yoga really is about. So I'm just a poor, lonesome yogi that only wants to be busy with yoga, and all the rest is superficial, distracting. So my ego has determined that this is for me the way to do, and for me that's perfectly fine. Now you still don't understand ego. I will give you some examples of ego. All Dutch people are stupid cheeseheads. All they know is windmills and tulips, and they're just a bunch of peasants. I'm Dutch. If you say that in public, I feel very offended, angry. I want to kill you. That is when my ego has control over me. So what do I do when people say something like that? I will just laugh and smile and say, maybe even confirm, yeah, you're right. We're just a bunch of peasants. But at least we are very successful at it. The Netherlands is quite wealthy as a country, quite successful in innovation and technology and what have you. You know, I've noticed throughout the years that I have to be very careful to make jokes. Making jokes, humor, is a way to deal with ego. You understand that? Mr. Bean, John Cleese, the typical British humor. If you don't understand it, you feel offended by it. But humor is designed to literally lighten you up. It allows the tension to dissipate, disappear, and energy to go up. A good laugh is very healthy for the spirit, literally. But if I make jokes about Dutch people, that's okay. If I make jokes about Russian people, provided there are no Russian students in class, that's okay. But when I make jokes about, where are you from? United States? Then all the people from the United States are offended. And they think, what kind of teacher are you? Asshole. I'm going to kill you. Or I make jokes about Indian people, Korean people. Do you feel what I'm talking about? If I say all Korean people, they are crooks, they're gangsters, they're whatever. What? What did you say? You get angry. That is ego. It's an ego that leads to that emotion. Because even if it's true what I say, you will still get angry. You understand what ego is? Not yet. We will continue to talk about it throughout the course because it's very important that you start understanding how ego makes you a prisoner of daily life situations. Once you can rise above that, you become the master of the universe, as Patanjali promises us. And becoming the master of the universe does not mean flying on a magic carpet through space, as you see in some ancient pictures, which is just symbolical. Being the master of the universe means that you are able to stay with yourself regardless of the circumstances. Hot or cold, you keep smiling. When people insult, you just are not affected by it. Yes, the very first reaction is indeed you feel a sting, but you very quickly overcome that and you come back to yourself. This is hugely important that you start understanding this, because all the conflicts are caused by ego. All the wars throughout history of mankind, one way or another, are caused by an offended ego. It leads to huge disaster, suffering. But on a small scale in our daily lives, it can mean the difference between failure and success. When you're communicating with your business partners or your colleagues, if you're not in control of your ego, they will develop a dislike of you. They will develop a resistance to work with you. On the other hand, If you are able to control ego, regardless of the situations that you find yourself in, people will develop an appreciation for you and will want to work more with you. Be cooperative when you have a new plan or a new whatever scheme that applies to the work that you are doing. This requires consciousness. And that is, of course, what we are working on by studying these subjects, and practicing yoga correctly leads to consciousness. In the long term, you would discover all this that I'm telling you today on your own. But if you have to do it on your own, you have to do that by trial and error, making many mistakes, and it will take many, many years. Now that I've told you how it works and how it affects your life, it still won't be easy because it's a whole new way of looking at yourself. But at least you are aware of it now, and when you find yourself in a situation where ego is triggered, at least you can now recognize it. And that will give you a head start of many years in the process in which you will develop. At the bottom of page 1, you will see that self-studying thoughts means concentration on the Aum mantra. I've repeated that sentence in various handouts, but it sounds like nonsense, doesn't it? What it really means, Aum, is meditation. The answer to everything that we are dealing with is to close our eyes so that we can consult with our heart, that we can consult with our conscience. The answers always lie in the silence of your meditation. All your insights will come as a result of you allowing yourself to be in a moment of silence. If you have the time, you can meditate for half an hour or an hour, but just a couple of minutes, closing your eyes and withdrawing yourself from the hustle and bustle of daily life around you will lead to incredible insights. I noticed while I'm on the riverside with my dogs, while I let them play, my mind, not my mind, my higher consciousness is putting things together, developing yet again another new insight into the things that we are studying. And then I present it to you. A new way of looking at things that I haven't taught in that way in previous courses suddenly becomes part of the current course. The silence, meditation. In the handout, I called it Om, but later, in some of the texts, later realizing that I should clarify it, I added between bracket, Om equals meditation. Another thing I should highlight is that the second paragraph says, practicing Svadhyaya or self-study is only possible if you understand and practice Saucha, Tapas and Santosha. Saucha is only possible if you live up to the previous 5 yamas. Tapas, that is the practice that leads to awakening of consciousness, leading naturally to self-study. Santosha, contentment, that is a very important ingredient that is very underestimated. When you develop consciousness of yourself, the first thing that we are attracted to, generally, is negative aspects, negative memories, negative experiences, emotions. That is just a human tendency to first feel drawn towards the negative. Contentment, we learned, among other things, means positive thinking. We have to do away with negative thought and try to start looking at things from a positive perspective, from a positive direction. That is not easy because it is a subconscious human tendency to look at things in a negative way. But I keep emphasizing that everything that appears to be negative on the surface will always lead to a positive and a constructive outcome in the long term. Now, another limitation that we have, apart from our tendency to look at things in a pessimistic way, in a negative way, another limitation is that we look at things in a short term, from a short-term perspective. And that is what causes us to only be able to see the surface, the initial negative event. But when you, as a result of your yoga practice, naturally develop a long-term view, you start developing the dots. You put the pieces of the puzzle in place and you see the pattern that, yes, although it started with a bang, it started with a negative event, it will lead to, it will evolve, it will lead to growth. Example, go back to politics again. I remember so clearly, I was consoling people in the end of 2015, when Trump was elected. Internet exploded. People were about to commit suicide, so desperate they were. People saw a huge disaster unfolding. Of course, I was shocked too, but as a yogi, I do what I tell you to do. I immediately rise above the first human reaction, instinctive reaction, and try to see the whole picture. And what I see, or what I saw, which is now proven to be correct, and what I then try to tell people in order to help them deal with the shock, is this is simply a small shake-up in a process that has been taking place for thousands of years of human development. The disaster that is unfolding now won't continue forever. What it will do is it will wake up many people that have fallen asleep. And it has shaken up. It has shaken up the whole world, not just that country where those elections took place. It has shaken up the whole world. And that was necessary if you look at it. It leads to more attention for minorities, for black people in America. It leads to more women in the current government. There are many more women in the current government and many more women, people from minorities. There is even, for the first time ever, there is a native Indian woman has been elected to a high place in government. The Ministry of, I forgot. Anyway, all those changes would not have happened if it were not for this disaster being elected. So in the end, you see progress and you sigh. As a yogi, you don't have to wait for 4 years to finally be able to breathe again. You have the ability to see where it will go. And you just sit out the ride knowing that there will be an end to it, and it will lead to progress. It will lead to new development. We were talking about contentment. Now you probably don't see the connection anymore, but contentment means that you go into the deliberation with yourself. The moment that you are confronted with something that shakes you up, that shocks you, you try to see the whole picture. And you do not need me to console you when such a disaster happens, like Trump being elected. But you go into a conversation with yourself and you say those things that I just said to you. You say, yes, this is, on the surface it looks really bad what is happening now with this guy, not only in charge of a country, but basically influencing the whole world. But you try to see the potential behind it. The potential is change, that positive change that otherwise would not have happened. Things needed to be shaken up, and it's also the reason why people chose him. People were sick and tired of things being stuck, of the establishment not being open for change unless disasters happen. And that disaster came in the person of a huge ego. A huge ego totally out of control. Paragraph 4, you see something about karma. Karma also I will refer to many times because, like ego, karma is widely misunderstood. When we talk about karma, we talk about good karma, bad karma, and that's correct. But that is very two-dimensional. Karma is three-dimensional. It's not only that if I do bad, then bad things will happen to me. That's indeed karma. But karma extends far beyond our life. There is group karma. There is national karma. There is international karma, global karma. The whole of history is in fact a process of karma. So there are always people, me included, who are dealing with a lot of conflict that didn't even take place after I was born. And because we see karma in a two-dimensional way, we say, why me? You compare yourself with other people and you say, they are all okay, and why me? Why am I in this situation? Why am I missing this or that, or lacking this or that, or why am I so unhappy and they are not? That is because you cannot see the whole picture. And it took me decades to start seeing it, and then enabling me to tell you how it works. I am not alone. And when I was born in 1964, that was an age of certain energy, vibration, that I was born in. That is my generation's vibration. How do you explain that, for example, a child is killed, or worse, sexually abused, raped? When you look at karma two-dimensionally, you say, "Ah, but the child didn't do anything wrong, it's innocent." And that is correct. That is correct. But we are born not clean from everything. There is a whole history of the place in which we are born. I was born 19 years after the Second World War. Many people had their life together by then. But my father did not. My father was a Jew. His whole family, were all killed in the Second World War. Because of that, my father has never been a father to me. He's never been able to deal with it. But I tell you what, and this is about contentment, he survived the war. If he had learned yoga from me, he would have understood that although all his family was killed, he should count his blessings because he survived. But that's my karma. My karma, I didn't do anything wrong when I was a child. But I can find contentment by understanding the history before it. Because I'm a product of that history. You know, one of my best friends in Seoul is a German. How is that possible if your whole father family was wiped out by the Germans? That is because I control my ego. Because he didn't do anything wrong. Can you understand that? Crazy, huh? No, it's not. So, once you are able to see this, whatever it is that happened with you in the past, if you understand that, if you see that, if you see connections with a generation before you, or even 5 generations before you, or 10 generations before you, you can then practice contentment. And this will free up so much energy for you that you can actually do something positive and constructive with your trauma. If you find that difficult to understand, just all you have to do is look at me. Because my family did not overcome their trauma. I have 2 brothers who died in their mid-40s because they were not even conscious of their trauma. They just hid it. Like I did when I was a child and a teenager. But because of practice of yoga, opening up consciousness, I very slowly but certainly developed insight and connected the dots. So when life presents you lemons, you make lemonade, as the Americans say. You do something good with something bad. That is contentment. If you are not capable of doing that, especially if you are a person who is traumatized, you drown yourself. Literally. Like my brothers did. They drowned themselves in alcohol and drugs. I chose another way when I had the power to choose. It's the reason why I'm so passionate about teaching yoga the way that I do. Not the way that other people do, just repeating a trick and repeating that trick again and again. But based on life, because yoga is the science of life. It's not an exercise. or some kind of mysterious religious kind of philosophy. It's about how we function in everyday life situations, and being able or being allowed to see that will incredibly improve our lives, your lives and my life. You understand a little bit more about karma? Look, I'm Dutch. Apart from that experience that my father had, I am also living in a country that has, throughout the centuries, had a lot of trouble with water. It's in my genes, but I don't even know it. I was once on a vacation in southern France, on the middle Mediterranean, on a beach. Then from inland there was a small stream of water coming down, crossing the beach, going into the sea. Me and my brother, we started building dikes. Just like that, spontaneously, we started canalizing the stream of water. Then there was a typical French ajoshi with a pipe in his mouth. And he was standing there for like 15 minutes or so, just with a smile on his face and sucking his pipe and hands behind his back, observing what we were doing. And at some point he said, "Vous êtes Hollandais?" Suddenly the light went on. He said, "You must be Dutch." He saw the karma at work of hundreds of years of Dutch people struggle with water. No other people, nobody else on that beach did anything to canalize that water except the Dutch people. As a play, not knowing what we were doing, we just naturally went to work and started canalizing that water. That is karma. So, you're from Turkey, you have your own karma. You're from Colombia, you have your own karma. From India, you have it. Everybody. And that is what distinguishes us. But in the end, we are all the same. We are all brothers and sisters from the same energy, from the same soul consciousness. But it is our karma that makes us look different, that makes us act and react different, but in the end, we're all the same. You understand karma a little bit better now? So it's not only that if I push you and you push me back, that is karma, sure, but it goes much deeper than that. And if you understand that, you will be able to remove a huge obstacle in your life, especially if you had any form of traumatic experience in your life. Which for many people is, if not difficult, impossible to overcome. Now, I basically said everything that I thought was important, but I have something interesting here for you that is related to self-study. The subject of this graph is purpose. Have purpose in life. Many people, since we are born, our parents tell us what to do and what not to do. Education then builds on that, pushes us in a certain direction. The government has laws and regulations and also wants us to behave in certain ways that contributes to the whole of the economy and the country, society. As a result of all this conditioning, many people do not really know who they are. Self-study leads us, little by little, to get rid of all that conditioning. You can see it as an onion. You have an onion that has many layers. But if you take away all these layers, there is this little egg inside the onion, this little bulb. Look at this little bulb as being your true self. Most people are a full onion, and they have no idea of this little bulb in the center. The self, the real self, the true self. As a yoga practitioner, in a very natural way, a process will take place where one by one you take away those layers of the onion. That is actually self-study. And you will inevitably end up at the bulb in the center. The way I present it, it sounds like concrete science. It's not. It is very vague. Often you are in doubt whether you are really feeling what you feel. But the more time passes, the more closer you come to that core, the more certain you will become about that also. To enhance the process, try more and more to follow your feeling. This is counter what you have been taught. Parents and teachers and the government, they all want you to use your head. Don't get distracted by feelings. But it is because of that approach that we get lost, that we lose ourselves. Part of self-study is to start listening to what we actually feel. If something feels resistant, if something feels bad, we have to investigate why. And if possible, try to get rid of it. That is not easy, because all of us are conditioned to do things that we don't like to do, that we don't want to do. But we do them dutifully. So it's not that simple. But I told you the story about the girl whose father wanted her to be the national representative of the Korean ski team. You remember? And I pictured the difference in energy. When she was told to do something that she hated, she would totally collapse. And everything would feel difficult and hard and painful, physically and mentally. But the moment she would think about something that she was passionate about, it totally changed her energy. All the energy would go up and she would be in heaven. For you, that is an indication of how to look at life. So, you cannot quit your job tomorrow when you come to the conclusion that it's not really what you want to do in life. It doesn't really make you enthusiastic. Or worse, it makes you feel it makes you feel like that poor girl that was forced to come to my yoga class, and it makes you feel like, and many people like that. You see them going to work in the morning. We are all part of that society. This is about, you know how people solve the problem that we are looking at here? They start with a hobby. Yoga can become your hobby. While you go on with your life and still earn money to pay the bills with a job that you don't really like, You can start doing something on the side that makes you feel passionate. Something that makes you feel like this girl when she thought about going to school and she would cross the road like this, happy to go to school. That is why people have hobbies after work or in the weekend or during the holidays. Something that you can immerse yourself in and just be like a little child. You love it. There's something you really love. Investigate what that is. Pursue it. Whatever it is. Passion. You love something, every time you are allowed to be active with that thing, that activity that you love so much. Passion. Naturally, when you do things that you're really passionate about, you become very good at it. People who are good at sports are so because they really love that sport. People who are good doctors, they stand out among the other doctors, the average doctors, because they're very passionate. Either about the science of medicine, but more likely about actually really helping people. So, when you do something that you really love to do, passion, you immerse yourself, you naturally become a specialist. A good cook. You know, there are many restaurants. From today, start looking at it in this way. And you will see there are many restaurants where you don't want to go anymore. Why? Because the people running the restaurant started the restaurant for the wrong reason. They started the restaurant to make money. And you feel that as a customer. But a person who's passionate about food starts a restaurant. The atmosphere in the restaurant is totally different. The atmosphere in the people, among the people working in that restaurant is very different. And the food is very different. You want to come back there. The other restaurant is just to fill your stomach. Next time, whatever other restaurant is available, you will go there. That's not the point. It's the same with yoga. There are hundreds of thousands of yoga teachers in Korea. Most of them, they just need to earn some money. But some of them, they are really passionate and they become a specialist in one form or another. So, you love it, passion, you're great at it. You start a restaurant. It becomes your profession. Restaurant or yoga or childcare or anything you're passionate about. If you're really passionate about it, you pursue it, it eventually becomes your profession. Now the best part comes. You get paid for it. Yoga, both the Hatha Yoga Pradipika and the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, strangely, because we think it has no place in spiritual circles, but both books promise wealth. They promise that you will get rich as a result of your spiritual practice. It seems like a contradiction or a paradox, because spirituality is, on the contrary, it's against. But no, that is not what it is about. It is about this process. The restaurant, of which the owner and the cook is passionate about food, doesn't have to do effort to get new customers. Because when I go there, I feel the atmosphere, the friendliness. I feel welcome. And then the food is just amazing. I will come again next week. Not only that, anybody who wants to hear, I will tell them how fantastic this restaurant is. The opposite happens also. Somebody just started a restaurant for lack of a better alternative. There are many of these kind of restaurants, most of them. To pay the bills, in Korea, for example, there's a situation where people retire early. They're forced to retire at an early age. But those people are not done yet. They can't live from the pension. So the money that they get from their the company where they work, they will start a small restaurant. It's a necessity. They have no other choice. That is the thing that people do. But you taste. You feel the atmosphere. And you will probably not come back there again. And not tell friends and family about it, to go there as well, because it was so great. So, as a result of the way that we are conditioned, we will always continue to struggle, also financially. Because many of those businesses go bankrupt within 2 or 3 years. Statistically, most of them go bankrupt within 2 or 3 years. And that's sad. All those people invested goes lost and causes a lot of misery. The other side is the same story, but it takes another turn. Something becomes a mission. You have a big heart for animals. It becomes your mission, which is directly related to passion. But your mission is to save all the poor animals in the world. Of course, that's not possible, but what you can do is volunteer at a shelter and grow and develop. Eventually start your own rescue mission, your own rescue center. Doctors Without Borders is full of professionals who sacrifice a huge part of their lives. Of course, they will get paid in the end. But they go to war zones, take huge risk with their life. They're passionate about helping those poor people that are the victim of those conflicts. Mission. Therefore, the world needs it. The world needs what you do. The world needs the big heart that tries to make things better for people who can't help themselves, or animals. Here we call it a profession. On this side we call it a vocation. Destiny. If I have to put myself into a category, I belong in both categories. I'm not only very passionate about yoga, I also want to really help people with it. So both sides apply. It is a long road, but you will get there. There is, I must have mentioned it before, there is this poem, The Road Not Taken. You know the poem, The Road Not Taken? All Korean school children learn about that poem. You are walking on a road and you arrive at a fork in the road. 95% of the people go to the right. 5% of the people go to the left. Five percent of the people that go to the left, they end up here in this process. The 95% that have no spine, that have no courage, that are afraid of change, challenges, obstacles on the road, they stay stuck in a life that doesn't inspire, but also is pretty comfortable and safe and secure. I'm pretty sure as a yoga practitioner, even if you were on this path, you will switch. Because you become more conscious and sensitive, and you will not be able to ignore anymore the attraction that you have to something that is really close to your heart, literally close to your heart. And it's only a matter of time that you will more and more start pursuing it, up to the point that you become a specialist of one sort or another. The road not taken, you understand? The road not taken? The fact that you are here in this class shows that you're already, maybe reluctant, but already you are on that road not taken. Why do people not take that road? Out of fear. Fear of the unknown, uncertainty. Obstacles and challenges are not seen as a positive, but as a negative, to be avoided. We know that obstacles and challenges make us grow, allow us to mature, become wiser, stronger. And it leads to fulfillment. Self-study, Svadhyaya, naturally leads to this process. It involves to start paying attention what you feel good about. But it also means that you start paying attention to the things that cause resistance, that cause your energy to drop down and kill your spirit. And throughout the years to come, you very slowly start to switch to the things that uplift you. And if you can, you try to more and more withdraw from whatever it is that brings you down. Because this is normally daily life, it's a process that takes not years but decades. But once you understand that that is what life is about. And there's no need to be in a rush. There's no need to be impatient or unhappy to be at the stage where you are now at. You practice contentment, knowing that opposed to your life before yoga, you are on the right path now. You practice contentment by telling yourself that it may not be easy, but you are on the path now. There are many people still looking, searching, lost. At least you found the entrance. That is contentment. Headache? Questions? Wonderful, huh? This is what yoga really is about. It's not about the perfect stretch, the perfect pose. It's not about flexibility or pretzel pose or a handstand. If you practice long enough, you will improve, you will physically get more skillful. But that's a matter of many years as well. And it's not even important. It's just an expression of the fact that you have practiced for so long, that's all. An indication of the fact that you've practiced for so long. I can put my feet behind my head, but I mean, that took time. But I never pursued it, I never forced it. Just one day I tried and it worked. Do not try to copy that, it's totally useless. You will just get hurt. But I've been in yoga for 40 years almost. So you become good at it. Okay, let's have a short break.